the Pittsburgh community was really grateful that we as a convention were there. Come on up. I just want to say thank you to Nina again. First, I didn't ask her to talk about this, so she's completely unprepared about what I'm going to ask her to do. But I just wanted her for a couple of minutes to say, because we didn't do it yesterday, what the kind of community relationships are in terms of fighting for equity in our schools in Pittsburgh. I want to thank everybody who marched. If you see the press from today in terms of Pittsburgh, it's pretty awesome about putting these issues. But when you are a human shield, like we were yesterday, when we marched, what it does is it creates a news story which now everyone in the Pittsburgh greater community knows. And that was the importance and part of why we marched yesterday. But I also, as Nina talks a little bit about what that march was about, I also want to just thank our Pittsburgh, I want to once again thank our Pennsylvania delegation, and Ted Kirsch, but I want to particularly thank our Pittsburgh delegation, because I have heard from delegates over and over again that this has been already one of the best conventions we've ever had. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you want me to talk about our partnership?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us in the rally yesterday. It was a great message to so many in Pittsburgh to show the solidarity of our union and so many of our community partners that joined us. From groups, we had some members of our school board there that we certainly don't always agree with. We were 3 days away from a strike a few months ago, so I was very glad to see them there. We had our great partners from One Pennsylvania that helped us make so many of those beautiful signs that were with us and that we waved so proudly. We had members there from SEIU, the firefighters, and Allegheny County Labor Council, who are such great partners to us, and State Representative Ed Gainey. We have made so many partnerships, and I know you met Reverend Welch the other day. And, I can't forget our great partners from PIN, Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. Aren't they wonderful? Through our work with Great Public Schools Pittsburgh that we started about 6 years ago, we have started a true relationship and partnership. And the greatest thing about it is, I'll tell you what, we don't agree all the time. We have had some very deep differences, but we know, first and foremost, our work for public schools is in our heart and it's in our souls. And we may disagree, but we've all made the agreement that we're going to keep working for public schools. And we're putting that first. And though we may disagree, we're going to keep going forward for public schools. Sometimes we've just had to say, all right, I love you. We're going to agree to disagree, but we're going to keep going no matter what. So thank you for being there with us. We showed Pittsburgh and a lot of people the love and solidarity that we have for our public schools, and we're going to keep making things better. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Andy.
I guess Pittsburgh is in the house. Loretta.
We'll now move to our AFT Hero Awards, Karen Gumashama, and we will roll the film on it. Karen.
Just weeks after Hurricane Maria, the AFT and partners launched Operation Agua to send water filters to Puerto Rico, providing much-needed safe drinking water to the storm-ravaged island. The AFT has raised $1.9 million, sending 80,000 filters to schools and families. Across the country, AFT members stepped up and involved their students in raising money. Karen Gumersheimer and her students at Gateway Michael Elementary School in St. Louis wanted to help.
Gateway Michael is a school for children who are physically and mentally handicapped. It's just a warm atmosphere for children to go to school. The 8th grade teacher from last year passed away suddenly 2 weeks before school started.
Miss Gumersheimer was a former teacher who had retired, and I asked her to come back and take over until we could find another teacher.
And I felt like I could make a little bit of difference in their lives. Each year, the 8th graders in the school do a service project, and the children in the class decided to collect money for the hurricane that devastated the people in Puerto Rico.
We went to each classroom, collect money.
I wanted our money to make a difference. So when I got the email from the American Federation of Teachers, I talked with the kids about the water purifiers, and we decided to donate our money to Operation Agua.
It made me feel happy to collect money.
We help about 1 week in Puerto Rico.
I thought that would make somewhat of a difference for the small amount of money we collected, but make a big difference in the lives of people in Puerto Rico. It also, I think, made them feel good that they could contribute in some way to help people who really needed their help.
I'm so glad that Ms. McGee was able to come back, and I'm pretty sure that these students are as well.
You're a good teacher.
I just want to thank you so much for this award. I know the children will be so excited when I get to show it to them. And thank you once again.
Thousands of people across the entire world.
I think this march is really showing the world that women are in solidarity.
It's important that we not allow Trump to claim the working class.
This is just the first step. The question is how do we organize a resistance to challenge the kind of policies that are going to come down over the next 4 years.
Help address this chronic issue. If you want high-quality health care for your family and for your community members, it's imperative that we all go and talk to our representatives on the local and on the national level.
People now are starting to understand that their vote counts, their voice counts, and that it's really important to get out there and vote, speak up, show up. I mean, we were able to stop the dismantling of the Health Care Act.
That is not standing with the working class of this country.
A majority of Trump voters are against Trump Care because you got the message out. We need you never to give up.
Democrat to Republican, I don't care what's behind your name, but I do care about you fulfilling promises.
I'm a voting constituent. I vote in every election. My polling people know me. It's one thing to stand here and say you support us. It's another thing to vote someone into office that supports us. So I'm looking for people to vote at the ballot box.
We all took 2 days off so that we could teach the entire state of Colorado that our funding is at a crisis level.
The most important thing is that we get our neighbors, coworkers, students, parents to vote in this next election.
The only time that things change is when people stand up and do something about it. You have to vote.
Students, what do you see?
I see teachers walking for me.
This is part of the democratic process. It's better to speak up for the things that you believe in. And now we're asking our legislators to take a look at how many of us there are. We do vote.
As a board member, please explain how you will fund those things that I do believe.
I'm hoping to see candidates who are in full support of public education.
Election day featured on the ballot a controversial proposal.
If you have a constitutional convention, achievements that unions have built up will be taken away.
That's why the United Federation of Teachers is urging members to vote no, and so are many other unions.
Vote no on the Constitutional Convention.
Voters overwhelmingly said no.
With all these cuts, New Mexico is going to fight back. Who is really going to work as hard as you are in the classrooms every day? And it's important to see legislators and representatives stand up for us because people are the ones who vote for them, so they are supposed to be representing what the people need.
We're fighting for children.
I can't imagine our federal government stripping away the programs that students need. I can't see that as being an American value.
Labor is in the House, and if we do our job, we will get the House back. And it starts with you. Are you ready?
The same crowd paying for that entire movement, attacking our unions. They can do whatever they want in the courts, but they cannot drown out your voice. In a time when they are trying to divide us, we are united in this district for the first time in a long time.
In a district President Trump won by 20 points in 2016, Democrat Connor Lamb with a stunning upset.
You did it! You did it!
It's an embarrassing loss for President Trump, who rallied against Lamb. There are more than 100 Republicans in Congress whose districts are more competitive than Pennsylvania's 18th.
Teacher for 10 years, I saw how poor policy affected our classroom.
I'm proud of our community for coming together and electing a real-life teacher to the school board.
The best job that I've ever had in my life was a public school teacher right here in the Chicago Public Schools.
Christine Pellegrino may not be a household name, but she is making national headlines. The teacher and political newcomer from West Islip became the first Democrat to win election to the state's 9th Assembly District ever.
I'm very much like you. I'm a teacher, and I care very deeply about my community.
In a state where rehabilitation services are absolutely crucial, he walked the line with us.
Whether it's HPAE, whether it's AFT, I'm alongside of you.
Hopefully, if we all get out to vote,
Phil Murphy will be our next governor.
Take a look at this. Phil Murphy will be elected governor.
You chose to take our state in a new direction. And today, full of hope for a better future, we begin that journey together.
We're ready to lead the fight, but we can't do it by ourselves. Are you ready to fight with us? That's what we need.
Ralph Northam's wife is a teacher, so he understands what educators go through.
Keep making your voices heard.
I think we have the power of changing minds. We have the voices that really matter, the voices of children, the voices of parents, the voices of teachers.
CNN projects that Ralph Northam will be elected governor of Virginia.
Buenos días. Good morning. It is an honor to be surrounded by the most important professionals in the world, teachers. Although teaching is the most important profession, teachers don't get paid enough and don't have the best labor conditions. However, we're still standing and working against the odds to provide the best education for our students. My name is Johanna Lopez. I grew up in the projects of Puerto Rico. When I moved to Orlando in 1998, I was afraid of looking for a job as a teacher because I did not speak English fluently. I started volunteering at Colonial High School, a Title I school where more than 80% of the students are Hispanic. And then became a full-time teacher. For the past 19 years, my students and I have grown together inside and outside of the classroom. From registering more than 500 students to vote, to raising funds to support the victims of 9/11 and their families, my students and I have worked to empower our community. And in 2016, I became the first Latina Teacher of the Year of Orange County, Florida. As teachers, we all have an inspirational story. Every day, we are changing lives and shaping the future of our nation. I am a proud teacher and an AFT activist. There are clear problems that teachers face inside and outside of the classroom. Public education and teachers are under attack. Across the country, educators are afraid to speak up, and our students are not being heard. That's why I decided to run for the Orange County School Board, which currently does not have any teacher as a member. From the White House to local school boards, politicians have failed to provide solutions to teachers' concerns. I am tired of politicians telling me what to do in my classroom. I am tired of politicians failing to give us better salaries, better evaluation systems, and more autonomy. I am done begging for attention from our elected officials. Instead, I am running to take their seats, and you should too. Teachers need to run for office, to mobilize their communities, to volunteer, to help elect other teachers, and to defend the dignity of our profession. Now is the time for us to take a stand and take our seats on school board after school board all across the nation. If elected, I will become the first Latina school board member of Orange County Public Schools, a district that serves a 43% Latino student body where our voices continue to be ignored. There's more at stake for teachers than ever before. We have a responsibility of coming out to vote on November 6th. We have a responsibility of standing up for our rights and for democracy. So I ask you to join me and my students by visiting votejohannalopez.com. Let's continue to be the heroes of our country. Let's vote like never before. Thank you.
So, what's that website again, Johanna?
I'm sorry?
What's that website again?
votejohannalopez.com. Thank you.
So today and tomorrow, we will be seeing some candidates. Remember I said 300 of our members. We're not going to be seeing 300 people. But 300 of our members are running for office. That's triple what normally happens. You can imagine our members are pretty engaged in politics, but this is triple. And we need to have triple, quadruple. We need to have that kind of effect at the polls. We have to be involved like never before politically, and we have to all be activists. And I get to introduce one of the fixtures of activism in our country in the last few years. It's actually been far more than that. And for those who are in Vermont, they have seen this for decades. Bernie Sanders, I told you, is a champion for a lot of reasons. But his campaign for president inspired millions of Americans, particularly a rising generation that was very skeptical of those of us who are baby boomers, that the government could solve the country's problems, that it could fight income inequality if the right people were in office, that the problems of wage stagnation, rising costs and inaccessibility in healthcare, the problems of a tax system which has now actually gotten more inequitable, of the lack of investment in our schools, our bridges, the issues around environment, the issues around public services. Those things could be solved if we ended the rigging of the system by the rich, the rigging of the economic and the political system. So yes, there's a lot of people who have felt the burn, and have felt the burn even more and more as these last 2 years have occurred and have happened, including myself. But it's what he has done in creating a climate of activism that I am so grateful for, because it is creating an army of activists whose energy is absolutely critical for us to successfully fight the hateful, corporatist, oligarchical, kleptocratic, cronyistic policies of the Trump administration and many who are in the Republican Congress. Bernie asked the right questions. Is America about the middle class or Wall Street? Will we help the vulnerable or the well-heeled? Are we about jobs and good wages or CEO bonuses? Are we about working people or their bosses? But more than that, and this is something my kids at Clara Barton taught me a long time ago, Bernie walks the walk. It's not just rhetorical. When the strikes were happening, West Virginians say walkouts for a bunch of different reasons. In West Virginia, Bernie and his office called, "What can we do to help?" And after the disaster in Puerto Rico, he introduced legislation like Elizabeth Warren did, calling for billions in urgent humanitarian assistance and creating a blueprint for a sustainable and strong future on the island. And before he did that, he called us to say, what do we need to do? In the last few weeks, he has been our most important ally in this fight against the University of Vermont Medical Center in support of our nurses. He flies up from Washington to be on their picket line, to fight for them, because the fight about health care is personal in Vermont, not just about the whole country. So, Senator Sanders, Senator Sanders, I want you to be reintroduced to this body of activists as we are honored with your presence at our convention. Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. As a proud graduate of PS 197, I'm delighted to be here. Let me thank President Randy Weingarten and every one of the members of the AFT. You know and I know this is not an easy time to be an educator. It is not an easy time to be a trade unionist. But on behalf of millions of children, their parents, and their community, I thank you for doing some of the most important work in the United States of America. And as Randy mentioned, let me give a shout out to the brothers and sisters, the nurses, AFT nurses in Burlington, Vermont. They have staged a 2-day strike for decent wages, decent benefits, decent patient-staff ratios, and they have the support of our entire community in Burlington. Now, I know that over the last few days, you have heard remarks from some of the most knowledgeable people in our country, so it is not necessary for me to repeat what they have said. So what I want to do in the time that I have is bluntly sum up where I believe we are today as a nation, where I believe we have got to go in the future, and how we can best reach our goals. Now, what I'm going to tell you contains some bad news, which you already know, and it contains some good news. But what I want to convey to you from the bottom of my heart is that if we stand up and fight back, if we educate and organize, if we show the courage and unity that this moment in history requires, I have no doubt but that we are going to win and bring a beautiful future to our country. Now let me go over some of the bad news. First news you already know, and that is economically. Despite the relatively low unemployment of today, real wages for American workers could continue to decline. Millions of Americans are today working 2 or 3 jobs, including teachers all across this country. And we have 40 million people living in poverty. Meanwhile, the wealthiest people in America have never had it better. We have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. And today, that inequality is worse than any time since the 1920s. In America today, the top 1/10 of 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. Today, 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of the American society. Today, 52% of all new income is going to the top 1%. Today, the CEO of Amazon, wealthiest person in the world, earns $275 million every single day. But he pays many of his workers wages that are so low that many of them are forced to go on Medicaid and food stamps. And when we talk about education, please remember that today, the top 25 hedge fund managers on Wall Street make more money than all of the kindergarten teachers in this country combined. Giving tax breaks to billionaires, spending unlimited sums on the military, and telling us we do not have enough money for education is not the priorities that the people of this country want to see. Now that's what's going on economically. Politically, we have a president who in an unprecedented way is motivated by greed and power. He is also a pathological liar. And I know every day you tell your students, you say to your kids, tell the truth. You say to your kids, don't be bullies. And what kind of terrible example is he setting to the children of this country? But he is also a president who has betrayed the people who voted for him. During his campaign, Trump told the American people that he was going to protect the working families of this country. He lied. He promised that he would bring health care to everybody, but he ended up throwing 32 million Americans, trying to throw 32 million Americans off of the health care that they have. His efforts to destroy the Affordable Care Act are driving insurance rates up every single day. And if you can believe it, his administration supports ending the provision which protects people who have pre-existing conditions. During the campaign, you'll all recall, Trump said, I'm a different type of Republican. I'm not going to cut Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. But he then brought up a budget calling for a $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, $500 billion in Medicare, and billions in the Social Security Disability Insurance Program. During his campaign, he promised that his tax bill would not benefit the wealthy. He lied again. 83% of the benefits of that tax bill at the end of 10 years go to the top 1%. He said he was going to take on Wall Street, but he ended up deregulating Wall Street and bringing more Wall Street executives and billionaires into his administration than any president in history. But not only has his economic policies benefit the very rich, the truth is that his social policies are even worse. In a way unique to any president in modern history, he is, in the most un-American way possible, attempting to divide the people of our country up based on the color of our skin, our country of birth, our gender, our sexual orientation, or our religion. Several weeks ago, some of you may recall that Donald Trump said it was an indication of strength to tear little babies on the southern border from the arms of their mother. Mr. Trump, that is not an indication of strength. That is an indication of moral weakness and extreme cruelty. And that is not what this country is about or ever will be about. Thank you. And when Trump tries to bring back discrimination in this country, we tell him that this country has suffered for too many years from racism and sexism and homophobia and xenophobia. We are not going back, we are going forward. And for all of these reasons and more, the American people are going to make Donald Trump a one-term president. Today we have a Congress significantly funded by wealthy Republican donors that in many ways has ceased to be an independent branch of government. Instead, it has become a willful and obedient puppy dog for the president, largely ignoring his attacks on democracy, his attacks on the media, his attacks on the judiciary, his attacks on federal law enforcement agencies, and his dangerous movement toward authoritarianism. For all of those reasons and more, we intend in the 2018 midterm elections to end one-party Republican government in Washington and take back the House and the Senate. We have a Supreme Court. You all remember the Supreme Court? We have a Supreme Court that in recent years has faithfully and consistently done the bidding of the wealthy and the powerful. They have given us the disastrous Citizens United decision, which allows billionaires to buy elections and undermines American democracy. They have given us a decision on the Affordable Care Act, which allows governors all over this country to deny Medicaid coverage to millions of Americans who desperately need that coverage. They have made decisions which undermine the Voting Rights Act, allowing governors to make it easier to suppress the vote for people of color, for poor people, and for young people. And they have recently given us the disastrous Janus decision. Well, you know, sometimes decisions and actions have unintended consequences. And I have the feeling that those who thought that the Janus decision would hurt the trade union movement in this country may be in for a big surprise. And it may end up being one of those decisions that helps us rebuild the trade union movement in America. Now, those are some of the bad Supreme Court decisions coming up. May well be Roe versus Wade and other important decisions. And for all of those reasons and more, we must do everything that we can to defeat the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh as the next Supreme Court Justice. Now, that's some of the bad news that's out there. But here is some very, very good news. And in fact, the good news trumps the bad news. And that is that all over this country, people are standing up and fighting back, not just against Donald Trump, but more importantly, for a progressive agenda that creates a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%. Pay attention, because the media often does not, but there is a political revolution sweeping across this country. As Randy mentioned when she introduced me, we are now seeing ideas that just a few years ago were considered fringe ideas, radical ideas, but today, because workers all across this country are standing up and fighting back, those ideas are now mainstream ideas adopted by the vast majority of the American people. And we are seeing great candidates running for office on those ideas and winning elections. We have seen just recently a young woman from the Bronx, New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was a waitress a year ago, will now be a United States Congresswoman and a progressive Congresswoman. We have, within the last month, seen the former president of the NAACP, a good friend of mine, strong progressive, Ben Jealous, win the Democratic primary in Maryland. And Ben is going to become the next governor of the state of Maryland. We have seen Larry Krasner, a district attorney here in Philadelphia. And Larry's idea of criminal justice is not locking up more people, but reducing the prison population. We have seen progressives in Chicago with Chuy Garcia helping to take on the Democratic machine there and bring young people into the political process. And right here, no better example, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, two young women were elected to the legislature, Summer Lee and Sarah Innamorato. They took on 20-year incumbents in the Democratic primary, brought hundreds of people into their campaign, and won landslide victories on progressive agenda. And as part of that political revolution, teachers all across this country are standing up and leading the fight for education reform. Who would have thought that in West Virginia, in Kentucky, in Oklahoma, teachers are demanding decent education for their kids and are taking on right-wing political establishments? Thank you, teachers. Young people in Parkland, Florida, who went through one of the most horrific experiences that any human being can go through. They didn't simply retreat and become depressed and mourn. They stood up and fought back successfully for common sense gun safety legislation all across this country. We're seeing workers successfully stand up and fight for a minimum wage, which is a living wage, $15 an hour. A few years ago, the idea that we should make public colleges and universities tuition-free seemed to be a radical idea. The idea that we should lower the horrific level of student debt in this country, a radical idea. But today, that is exactly what is happening in communities all across this country. Every young American, regardless of his or her income, should be able to get a higher education. And if Trump can give the billionaires a $1 trillion tax break, yeah, we could substantially lower student debt in this country. A few years ago, some of us said that maybe the United States of America should join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care as a right through Medicare for all. And editorial page after editorial page said, Bernie, you're crazy, that's too radical, the American people won't accept it. A poll came out yesterday, consistent with many other polls. 63% of the American people support a Medicare for all single-payer program. Brothers and sisters, our job now, more than any time in modern American history, is to think big and not small. It is to understand that when we reach out with a progressive agenda that speaks to the needs of working families, we can get people to run for office, we can increase voter turnout, and we can take on the oligarchy that now controls this country. Our job now is to change national priorities, to make sure that every American knows that there is nothing more important than a quality public education for every child in this country. So, brothers and sisters, in the midst of these difficult times, I am not pessimistic. I believe that this is a moment where the American people are saying loud and clear, not just to Trump, not just to Congress, but they are saying no to a set of priorities which benefit the wealthy and the powerful and ignore the needs of working families. Our job now, as never before, is to stand up, is to fight back, and to create the nation we know we can become. Thank you all very much.
To take up that charge? Are you ready to evangelize the nation for a better America? For a more progressive America? An America that fights for working families? Thank you so much, Senator Sanders.
Wow. It is because of the historical level of educators around the country, including the nearly 300 AFT members like you, running for office this election season, that we're going to be pushing back against austerity measures, public school closing, and cuts to vital public service. But it can't be just educators running for office. We need to have pro-public education, pro-public services, pro-affordable health care candidates who care, fight, and show up so we can vote for them. Our next guest gained national attention this past spring when he defied the odds of expectation and won a special election for Congress in a Republican-leaning district. He ran a campaign focused on protecting Social Security, fighting for affordable health care, opposing the Trump tax cuts for the rich, and trying to fix the student debt crisis. But most poignant in his race, he proudly put his support of organized labor at the front and center of his campaign. He's also a military veteran, a former U.S. attorney who was a leader on the fighting against opioids, and it is my pleasure to introduce our friend, Congressman Connor Lamb.
Good morning, and I know many of you have been here for several days already, but let me be one of the ones to say, welcome to the great city of Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Please let me begin by thanking our Western Pennsylvania teachers who are here for the terrific work that they did during our special election campaign. Thank you so much. The district I now represent was purposely drawn to make it difficult for a Democrat to win. But what lifted me up right from the very beginning was that our teachers and our nurses and our healthcare workers and all of organized labor looked at those same odds and they were not intimidated. Neither were the grassroots groups or the citizen activists whose hard work is now getting the attention that it deserves. Our campaign went everywhere. I went everywhere, we talked to everyone, and we won. And it was the teachers, it was the school workers, the nurses, the healthcare workers, and the steel workers, and the miners, and the operating engineers, the building trades, the Teamsters, the bus drivers, and the public employees of all types, and everyone in organized labor who carried us. I will never forget that. Thank you very much for everything that you did. My brother and my sister are teachers. I've worked with your members constantly for the last 9 months, and I know how much our teachers and all of our other support staff give in service, beyond the classroom, buying school supplies, and even meals out of their own pockets. I know how much our nurses and our healthcare workers give to their patients. And so what I need to say to you, and more importantly, what our country needs to say to you, is thank you for what you do every day. Now, I'd like to speak briefly about this fall's campaign. We're already hearing the same old stuff that we heard during the special election. Some people say there's a civil war in the Democratic Party. Some say the left is taking over. Some say the right is taking over. Some say labor has too much power. Others say labor is too weak. Some say the party stands for nothing. Others say we have agendas that are too specific, or too expensive, or too far out to be accepted. Some people just say the Democrats are dead, while others say we have too much variety, or even too much passion. Well, the people saying all of that are wrong. Again. I can tell you personally, I know for certain that they are wrong. In our election, I had the support of every kind of Democrat. How can that be when we don't agree on every method of achieving our goals? It's because we share the goals themselves, and we share our belief in community. And because we are serious people, we are practical people,
And we are working to do the great business of democracy. And because we have open hearts. The essential truth is that we represent the American majority on just about every issue of importance. The American majority doesn't want banks to have easier stress tests and lower capital requirements. Huge majorities want to avoid a repeat of 2008, when 8 million people lost their homes and millions more lost their jobs. Nobody but the pharmaceutical companies opposes allowing Medicare to negotiate the price of prescription drugs. A majority of Americans knew that the tax bill was a phony deal from day one. And they knew where Paul Ryan would try to go to get the money. He told them. He wrote it in his book years ago. He wants to pay off the extra deficit by cutting programs like Social Security and Medicare. And the day after that tax bill passed, Paul Ryan launched his latest attack on what he calls entitlements. He says they are unaffordable. And that's a great surprise to people where I come from, some of whom have been paying into Social Security and Medicare for decades, 50 years or more in some cases. And the more Paul Ryan tells them that they are not entitled to their own hard-earned benefits, their own hard-earned money, the more he reveals the dishonesty of that tax bill. That bill avoids every honest solution that could have paid for those tax cuts. And it was mostly legislation written for a tiny group of very rich people. They have slick TV ad guys that'll try to put lipstick on it, but that will not work. That bill does nothing for those who serve. It does nothing for teachers. It does nothing for nurses or healthcare workers or other employees. But what are we for? Well, we will defend Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. We will improve, not destroy, the Affordable Care Act. And in doing that, we will prevent the impoverishment, the medical death sentences that will result if you end affordable, universal coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. We will really attack the heroin epidemic. We will support unions. We will raise the minimum wage. And we will support public policy that is based on fact, not based on ideology. We will support public education. And we will end the student loan debt traps, especially for teachers and all of our public servants. The idea of saddling teachers with so much student debt that they can't afford to start families, or paying them so little that they can't afford to support a family properly, that is never how we conducted ourselves in this country. It is impractical, and it will not stand the test of time because it's wrong. The ideas we are running on are practical, they're proven, they're time-tested, and there is not one of these issues on which we have anything less than a strong majority of Americans behind us. We have a summer and a fall of hard work ahead of us, registering, organizing, and mobilizing all of our friends and neighbors. We know how to do this. No matter what happens in the courts, what happens at the ballot box in November, and in every November beyond that, is up to us. Be strong and joyous. The wind is truly at our backs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Connor Lamb. It is my pleasure to introduce Randy Bryce, also known as the Iron Stash, who is a candidate for Congress in Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District, the district currently represented by Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. Right? Randy is a member of Ironworkers Local 8. A Latino, a cancer survivor, a U.S. Army veteran, and someone who was a staunch ally in the fight against Scott Walker's Act 10. Randy Bryce is an unabashed champion of the middle class and has made it his mission to replace Paul Ryan with a worker. No wonder Speaker Ryan announced he is stepping down from Congress. So please give a warm welcome to a fellow of our union family, Randy Bryce.
How we doing, AFT? So great to see the delegates, educators, and nurses. Wanted to thank President Weingarten at the State of the Union. She came up to me and invited me to ask if I'd be interested in speaking here. She said, "Our members love you." Well, let me assure you that feeling is very mutual. It may sound crazy, but running for Congress was not on my bucket list. You know, there are people that have said that I'm a politician, but try as they may, I can tell you that I definitely haven't been able to pay my bills on a politician's salary. A year ago today, we were talking on a job site about doing something to actually make a change because we weren't being represented in Wisconsin or in Washington. And Paul Ryan had been one of the worst offenders. He had been talking about repealing and replacing our health care. 23 million people would be affected by it. And I looked at the other coworkers and I said, why don't we repeal and replace him? Shortly after Donald Trump was elected, I received a phone call from Voces de la Frontera. It's an immigrants' rights group back in Wisconsin. And they were asking me if I would start attending their emergency meetings. They were afraid that their families were going to be torn apart after Donald Trump had been elected. We saw how he ran. We saw what he was trying to do to us. This divide and conquer that Scott Walker used on us in Wisconsin. So I was able to help bring in labor, veterans, and members from other communities to stand with our immigrant brothers and sisters. It occurred to me that that's what we need to do. In that moment, and right now, we need to come together. So when I was asked if I would consider throwing my hat in the ring against Paul Ryan, I looked at the people around me, listened to their stories, and I saw how scared they were. I remember a young high school woman talking about being in her classroom, wondering if she was going to be able to make the day, or if ICE was going to come, rip her out, and take her to some detention center. She also had the same fear about being able to return home, and if her dad was going to be was going to be there, or if ICE was going to kick in their doors and take him away. So I remember just seeing these faces, and I knew that I could bring people together. I had to say yes. I believed then, and I still believe now, that we need a working person standing up for other working people. After I graduated from high school, I enlisted in the Army. And after my tour in Honduras, when I came back, I worked with homeless veterans. It was, and it still is appalling to me that those two words can be used in the same sentence together. Homeless veterans. When that grant ran out, I did what a lot of other veterans do. I ended up working 2 full-time jobs. And despite working those 2 full-time jobs, I didn't have health insurance. So when I was diagnosed with cancer, I had no way to cover the costs. I survived the disease, and I even proved them wrong when they said I wouldn't be able to have a kid. He's 11 now, but I was just talking with some delegates in the back who have, their sons have gone to the teen years, so I have something to look forward to. Let me say, at 11 years old, Dad's still pretty cool, and we get along great. His teens, we'll see. But the financial burden of having had cancer was insurmountable. And like so many others across our district, the country, I had to declare bankruptcy. Now, it took many years to crawl out of that hole, and I'm forever grateful that my ex-wife and I were able to put our son first, and make sure that he was taken care of until I got back on my feet. I know that my story resonates with countless people because it's their story too. Soon after, I was given the opportunity to have an apprenticeship as an iron worker. Now, working the iron is a tough job, but it was also what helped me to get out of debt and to be able to provide for my son. It gave us both good health insurance and allowed me entry into the middle class. One of the many reasons why I'm union proud. And in keeping with being union proud, I'm also very proud to say that our campaign staff was the first to organize in American political history. Our campaign workers are union members. But sadly, too many of these good-paying union jobs are being outsourced. And it's happening right here, back at home, and all across the country. That's why I'm here. That's why I keep fighting for all of us. And I'm fighting because I'm a father. I want a better life for my son. I want a better life for your sons, for your daughters. I want to be able to tell my son and his kids, when they ask back in this time in history, what did you do? I'm going to say, look, I was fighting for you. And I want to fight for kids all across the country that are just like him. We're going, brother. It starts with giving our kids the best shot at a good life, which means we have to get more funding for public schools. When Scott Walker took office in Wisconsin, one of the first things he did was cut nearly $1 billion from our public education. Now, that directly affected my son and his classroom, because what it did was it took that money away. It ended up closing another school in his district. All the kids had to get dispersed. And now he was born August 31st at 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes later, he would have had to wait an entire year to go to school. So when me and his mom were discussing when we should enroll him, should we hold him out a year? We said, no, everything's fine. This was pre-Scott Walker. So once he got in, he needed a little bit of help as far as reading. There were programs available. Title I was there, but that all went away with the Scott Walker budget. So when they closed a school nearby, not only, and also took away summer school program from his school, the kids were all dispersed. He ended up getting bumped because some students had lower test scores than his. So what should we do? Are we going to have to hold him back a year now? But it was by working with his teachers that they helped out. She ended up putting him closer up to her desk and gave me some suggestions. Here's how you can find out, the books that are too hard for him, too easy for him, just right. It was working with these teachers after class on her time that she was able to help out. But because of that, he ended up getting a B in English. We should also have tuition-free public colleges because college education should be accessible to children from all different backgrounds. I also believe we should have universal pre-K, more of it in areas that are disadvantaged minorities, people that need it, so that children are prepared from an early age and can get a head start on life. I'm also going to make sure we are protecting federal funding for low-income students and students with disabilities, because a good education should be a right in this country. As I've said, my son is the most important thing in my life. And I can tell you when I drop him off to be in a safe space where he can just focus on learning. I mean, we take our most prized possessions, drop them off in front of the school, and expect the people in the building to work miracles without paying them what they're worth. So why are we underfunding and underpaying the schools and the educators that are there for our children? Bottom line, we need to start treating our educators and our schools with the respect and dignity that they deserve. Teachers, educators, and nurses are the ones shaping the next generation. We need to start paying them what they're worth so we can set all of our children up for a better future. We also have another epidemic facing our schools. We have too many guns getting in the hands of wrong people. We've all seen the news, and we all know we have a gun problem in America. School shootings happen far too often here. Thoughts and prayers haven't solved the problem. We need common sense gun reform because we need to protect our students. And we see children, young children all across the country, telling us to stand up and fight for their lives. High school students, Parkland, high schools in Janesville, March for Our Lives. They're telling us we need to stand up for them. We're not doing a good enough job as adults. We need to listen. We are the ones that are supposed to protect them. So let's listen to them. Let's fight for them. I can tell you, I will not be sending my son to school with one of those bulletproof backpacks. I can't even believe they're making them. I'm not going to stand for that. We need common sense gun reform, and we need it now. Giving people more guns to protect themselves against guns doesn't make anyone safer. It's like having a kid on a playground throw a rock at somebody, so let's give all the kids a rock. And also, my sister is a fantastic public school teacher. I trust her with my son, but you don't want her having a gun in the classroom. We need to get more guns off our street and out of the hands of people who want to hurt our children. We need better mental health services to help our students so no one feels the need to turn to violence instead. Listen, I'm not a lifelong politician. I'm not someone who was groomed from a young age to serve in this role. But all my stances on issues come from talking to working families about what they need. That's why I'm here. I'm here because I believe health care is a right, not a privilege. And people shouldn't have to be making life and death decisions on choices because they can't afford their medications. I believe we need to protect the good-paying jobs that we have and bring more back to this country. That includes rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and investing in blue-collar jobs. Let's get back to exporting cars, not jobs. I also believe we have to protect our environment because our kids and their kids are depending on it. I believe that we need to make sure that our citizens are taken care of. We need to use our taxpayer money to give our kids better education and by paying public sector workers what they're worth. And I believe the people of this country deserve more than what we've been getting since Donald Trump took office. I've said it before, but it's far too important not to say again. This fight is far from over. You know, together, we did repeal Paul Ryan. And we're not going to stop there. We're going to repeal these Republicans in Congress as well this November. You know, one of my first memories when Scott Walker dropped the bomb during Act 10 was seeing the AFT banner there. And Candace was one of the delegates from Wisconsin. I remember her even before Act 10 and the bomb was dropped, showing up at the commemoration of the Bayview Massacre, where the Governor Rusk at the time, called the National Guard to shoot people that were standing up for the 8-hour workday. I'm walking in here today, I'll never forget seeing the banner. You know, we care, we fight. I remember you fighting with us back then, and I know we're going to fight together coming up in November. I tell our other members in the building trades and ironworkers union that there's nothing really special about me. There isn't. I was just one person that had enough. And if that's all that it turned out to be, you wouldn't be hearing from me. You never would have heard of who I am. But it's about other people that have been committed to stand up who have also had enough. It's not about me. It really is about us. Because we all care. We all will fight. And together, I guarantee you, we're going to win. Thank you.
I want to just honor the folks from Wisconsin who are here. I want you to come up so we can take a picture as Randy leaves. I saw Candace, I saw Kim, and I want them to do that because, look, we learned a lot from what happened in Wisconsin. There were a lot of rallies. I was at the Capitol so many times. Madison is a union town. Milwaukee is a union town. Janesville is a union town. Racine is a union town. And we saw by the way in which the right wing operated, how they went right after collective bargaining and our units that had done the work of collective bargaining, but had done the kind of, as Andy Pilata said yesterday, really outsourcing of our power to our leaders and had not been engaged in the same way as when we were founded. And they've taught us a lot about how to deal and how to fight and how to re-engage. And they are growing again. Thank you, Wisconsin, and thank you, Randy, for taking on Paul Ryan before he retired and being willing to do that. And we need you in the United States Congress. Thank you very much. Microphone 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A point of personal privilege.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask if the body would join me in acknowledging Randy's military service, and perhaps maybe you could ask all of the veterans in the room to stand up so we can acknowledge them.
What a great idea. So, I think we should acknowledge and respect and say thank you to Randy Bryce for his military service and ask all the veterans to stand up so we acknowledge the amazing, courageous military service of our armed forces who are there to protect democracy, to protect our freedoms, to protect not only the United States of America, but the world, so we never go into cataclysmic fights again like we have done. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your courage. And we as Americans need to make sure we respect that in the future. And thank you, Microphone 4, for acknowledging that and making us acknowledge that. Thank you. Every convention, we invite our former officers and those former officers who may be deceased, their significant others, their spouses, and one of our former officers are here with us today and have been here with us the entire convention, and that is Nat LaCour, our former Executive Vice President. And I just wanted to introduce him and honor him. He started in Louisiana. He had to he was in the aftermath of Katrina. He built a strong local, those, right-wing ideologues tried to snuff it out. He has been out there fighting the fight for dignity, respect, equity, and organizing, and actually put us on the path to the organizing work that we do. Thank you, Nat LaCour. And with that, remember I said, I know there are several lunches right now, but with that, there is the student debt clinics that are in Clinic 1A is in room 327, Clinic 1B is in room 328. And when do they start? They start at 5:30. What? So they start at 12:30 right now. Thank you very much. We are recessed to 2 o'clock.